Okay, we have 339-7140.
That's me, Justin Miller. Good afternoon.
Hi, Justin. How are you?
Great, thanks.
Let's see. Charles Waite.
I'm here.
Okay, Eric Connolly.
Here.
Steve Bulger.
I'm here.
Darren O'Connor.
Here.
Josh Spain.
Here.
Okay, and for guests, we have Matt Gratton from the University of Albany. We have, oh, Steve Bulger, I didn't miss you, did I?
No, you got Steve.
Okay, good. Tom Sedgwick from HRP Associates. Okay, and then we have staff, which is myself, Michelle, Mary, and Jenny. And I believe I said Dave Wood, correct?
Yes, you did.
Okay, good. All right.
Are you going alphabetically?
No. Oh, and Benny Slotnick. Benny, I missed you. I always save you for the last because I think you're used
Well,
to
let's just go alphabetically. You don't ever have to worry about it.
I'm trying to count my squares here. All right. I think we're ready to go.
All right, we're all set to go. We'll call the meeting to order. So the first thing we have to do is get approval for the minutes. They were sent out over the weekend, Friday or Saturday. I don't remember what day. So hopefully everyone got a chance to review the minutes. So
I move them.
thank you, Charles. First, second. Penny, I see her waving there. Thank you, Penny. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. So we're going to change the order around just a little bit here before we get to the treasurer's report. We're going to have Tom go through with from HRP Associates and discuss a few things that are going on here that we need to be aware of. So,
all right. So Shelby had asked me to talk about one of the opportunities for the county, and it would be a brownfield assessment grant. So just quickly, I should say I'm with HRP Associates. I'm a vice president. We've been helping communities with brownfield assessment grants for like over 20 years now. And what this grant is, and the county is eligible, what this EPA grant is for is to go out and identify and assess brownfields. So as you know, many communities have brownfields, and a lot of times developers and even the communities are skittish about even touching the site because they're concerned about the potential for environmental contamination, and no one really has an understanding how much contamination is there and what the costs are. So the EPA has these grants, and communities can get up to $300,000. It's a 100% grant, so it doesn't cost the community anything. There's no cost share. And what one can do with these grants is go do a phase one. Well, first of all, do an inventory of all of the potential brownfields in the county. Then you can assess them, meaning you can do a phase one site assessment on them to identify, is the site really contaminated? Because a lot of times we find that communities think a site is contaminated and developers avoid it. In reality, it isn't contaminated at all. And then you end up with a document that demystifies the site and says there is no contamination on the site. Or B, if it is contaminated, what we're able to do is do the phase two environmental site assessment and actually develop a remediation plan that then is blessed by the DEC and EPA. The remediation is not done, but there is a plan in place with costs associated with it. So when a developer or the community wants to develop the site, they know what the costs are, and they can put that in the boxes of all the things they have to assess, identify for the site. So it opens up the possibility of redeveloping the site. So really, once again, the whole purpose of the EPA Brownfield Grant is to remove the environmental barriers to redeveloping sites. So what's it take to get an application? They're competitive, very competitive. But I will say, after doing this for about 20 years, when I first started doing them, it would take us usually like 3 times to get one. Now, we're about 50% successful in the first year. We just did one for Montgomery County and got it in the first year. So now they have a $300,000 grant that's going to help them assess brownfields. And also we're working with Gloversville now. We're also working with Herkimer County. We worked in the past with Glens Falls. We've done a lot of work in Connecticut with these different sites. And then as far as the county's obligations, really, it's just about if you were able to get it. So what the county obligations, if you want to go for this, you'd have to have an authorization to go after the grant. And really that's about it. HRP would take care of writing the grant application. What we would request of the county if we were to proceed with this is just, obviously, hopefully Shelby would read it, Jennifer would read it, maybe a couple other people would read it. The more eyes we have on this, the better the grant is.
Right.
Um,
And Tom, when you
Yeah.
refer to the county, you're actually referring to the Saratoga County Prosperity Partnership.
Correct, I'm sorry, yes.
No, it's okay. I just point of clarification.
Okay. And then just the more eyeballs we have on it, the better. If you were to receive the grant, as far as obligation, it's just like another federal grant. There's reporting obligations quarterly and annual. So there's nothing more than you would typically see with a typical federal grant.
Right.
The other thing is, just so you understand what the grant application is, it's about 15 pages. It's all narrative, and we have to tell a story to make people cry in the beginning, and then have a process about how we're going to better people in the community and the environment. So as I quickly think of it, Saratoga County is really a county of two stories. You have wealthy communities and you have some counties, some municipalities that haven't been able to keep pace. But Saratoga County has a strong, long history of paper making that is more or less abandoned the county. And that's what the application would be centered around. And hopefully we submit it. Usually they come out in the October timeframe is when they get announced. They're submitted in December. You find out in April or May. So about 1 year from now, if we were submitted, we find out if we got it or not. And then we would be well on our way to helping improving the communities in the county.
And
And
So
Tom, oh, go ahead.
how
Charles.
how did this come to us? I assume the county could apply directly for such a grant, right?
Correct. Absolutely.
Come to us,
I went to the county.
and they refer to the Prosperity Partnership?
Yes, sorry, yes.
Interesting. Okay.
And do you charge a fee to do the grant application, or does that come out of the money if we get it?
No, we would not charge you a fee. What we're hoping to do is build a relationship, because what happens is if we're successful, you will be able to get a series of grant applications. We're working in one town in Connecticut right now. We've gotten 7 different grant applications, and and we get exposure to a lot of different things, and it's a win-win situation. So for the way we look at it, for a small investment up front, we can develop a very long-term relationship and help you develop a number of properties that hopefully we can help you with.
And it doesn't just include land. It also includes properties with buildings with potential hazardous materials in them, that the development of them has been stymied by an unknown cost factor of environmental remediation. And, that could be the hazardous materials, asbestos for the most part.
Asbestos, PCBs, lead paint, things of that nature. The
Mhm.
whole purpose of the grant is to help communities remove the barriers to redevelopment. Because my experience is, until someone understands the property, they stay away from it. So if a building is loaded with asbestos, everyone says it's loaded with asbestos, they don't know what the cost is, they're afraid of it. This grant can be used to go in, remove that mystery, and put a cost to it, so that at least the developer knows what they're getting into. And then it also makes for stronger applications if you're going for something under the consolidated funding. It makes for a stronger application because those questions are answered.
Right.
So let's say we get this application. How is the money expended and who gets it?
Once again, I'm going to say the county, the
Saratoga Partnership.
Saratoga Partnership, I'm sorry,
Okay.
gets the money, you manage the money. And then, so what happens is you don't get $300,000 put into your bank account. You would ask for upfront. So we would say, we're going to do the phase ones. We're going to do 10 phase ones, and let's say they're $3,000 each. So then Shelby would request $50,000 out of the fund that then goes into your bank account to pay whoever does them. So you can get ahead of your funding. They're not going to give you all the money at once. You just have to have a reason for the money.
And who does these kind of assessments? Is that something your does?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. I mean, we've
Yeah.
done.
Is there an ability for the Prosperity Partnership to reimburse their own expenses or get a management fee for some of this? And how much would that be?
Excellent question. Yes, you are, and I believe it's up to 10% now for administration fees for doing the various reports.
Which would be roughly $30,000, Charles.
Correct.
So there is no match associated with this particular grant program?
No match.
And another question I have in terms of procedure, the partnership would be the applicant moving forward with it. You mentioned earlier it's a very competitive grant. To what extent is it more beneficial for the county elected body or the municipalities within that area for the study for them to endorse the application? Since at the end of the day, they're the ones in terms of the governing entity responsible for a lot of activities.
So long as you're eligible, my experience is, so long as you're eligible, there's no extra points for different types of entities. Once you're eligible, everyone's treated the same, if that's your question.
Yeah.
Even though as a partnership, we do not have any regulatory controls, if you will, as relate to specific actions that will be taking place in any of these communities.
Correct, and it's correct. So for example, a lot of times we work with IDAs and agencies like that I believe are similar to yours. I mean, I realize they have a bonding approval, but they have no direct tie, and they're able to get the grants. And in some ways, it's better because then you have no loyalty to a particular municipality. And in your case, I think it's good to have an entity at the county level do it, because no one town in theory has enough to do what we need under this grant to do the assessments. So you're going to be able to spread it around the county, which is very positive. And there's no my experience is you get points based on who you are as an entity.
Right. And something that we would do that Tom has explained to me is that during this application process and upon approval, what they would want to see is us to assemble a task force of key decision makers throughout Saratoga County. So in that way, I think what we would do is engage the supervisors and chief elected officials throughout Saratoga County to identify priorities and make sure that all of their priority sites are potentially included and identified in the assessment process. And, you also need the cooperation of individual property owners as well to be part of this. But what this does is it unlocks ultimately sources of funding for future assessment. There are going to be tax credits that are associated with the redevelopment of their projects. And, just based on what we're going through right now, we're dealing with quite a few, whether it be Mechanicville School, the former Angelica facility down in the village of Ballston Spa. There's International Paper Corinth. Whether or not International Paper will let us on that site to do a site assessment is one thing. I'm even thinking potentially the county infirmary, which is now under private ownership. The obstacles are obviously, whether it's lead paint or other environmental obstacles that redevelopment process could potentially be sped up if they had other tools in the toolbox.
So would this application be focused on potential hot spots that have been identified within the county, or is the assessment to identify these geographic locations or physical buildings?
I guess both. You could, so as Shelby indicated, you would create a task force who then would identify these sites.
As part of the application process
Well,
or
as
after
part of
the
the application
application?
process, we would just have to highlight like three, four, no more than 5 sites. And Shelby already highlighted them to give examples of what the county is facing. Doesn't mean we have to do those sites, but it just is examples of sites that are typical of the county. And then the task force would then identify the sites that the funding would be expended on, be it a phase 1 or a phase 2.
Shelby, have you had any conversations with stakeholders, be it elected officials or private sector, that are engaged in these types of activities in their county to get their feedback and support for moving forward with this type of application that will be sponsored by the partnership?
Right now, I wouldn't want to extend our reach beyond the partnership board until I got your feel. However, I have been working with stakeholders, like for example, the Mechanicville School, and I am very much aware of some of the challenges that they do have with asbestos tiles and potential asbestos insulation wrap throughout that building. And I'm actively working with the Village of Ballston Spa right now, and actually made an introduction to them to a team that they're moving forward with a Brownfield Opportunity Act grant program, but that's a state program. They actually work very closely with Tom Sedgwick here from HRP, and this program could marry very nicely with what they're doing there. Again, have had conversations with the folks that own the infirmary. I know that the Victory Specialty Packaging facility is actually in the process of doing brownfield cleanup out there. So although I have not directly engaged them, asking them if they would support this application, I know that they have challenges that I'm sure that we could get the support.
But Shelby, I thought you said this referral of this firm was from the county.
I didn't say the referral from the firm was through the county, which is why I'm trying to clarify what Tom is talking about.
Sorry.
I actually got to know Tom. I've known HRP Associates for quite some time. They did the environmental remediation of the Mechanicville Industrial Park and a lot of that brownfield planning on like a 25-acre parcel down there. So I've been familiar with the firm for many years. And we started talking about this process with Tom back in the fall, and Marty wanted to engage HRP with starting an application process. But again, the timing was not good for that. So after Marty's departure, I started talking with Tom again to see what we could do about re-engaging and if this was still a possibility.
Okay, so this was not a referral from the county. So then
No.
Rocco's comment is important because we don't want to step on the county toes.
No, but what I would do is a full engagement with supervisors that did feel like they had potential problem areas of properties within their town so that they could be part of that. Again, that engagement, that site identification process. And I think it gives them another arm's length if we are managing the process.
Well, don't get ahead of the supervisors.
Never, no. I'm curious to hear what supervisors would think about having kind of an umbrella type of program throughout Saratoga County that they could identify sites within, and they could actually bring resources to their potential sites. I know that we have Darren, I'm looking at Darren right now. We have the former Malta rocket test fuel site that still has some, lingering challenges there. We do have challenges throughout Saratoga County, and if we can bring additional resources for the redevelopment of these sites, that could be a good thing.
Would lots as small as, say, a defunct gas station be looked at, or is it just larger lots?
Yeah, absolutely. Whatever you want.
Okay.
Is there any limit on petroleum product contamination?
There's a distinction. There's petroleum impacted sites, and then there are hazardous substance sites, which are your typical, like a dry cleaner, solvents, asbestos, things like that. But what we would do is go after it's a $300,000 grant where we can work on both sites. But the EPA does make a distinction, identify the contaminant, but that's just an administrative thing that would take care of, that wouldn't even appear to you. And the other thing I'd like to point out, and Shelby pointed out, this money can also be used on private sites. So you can use the money to do a phase 1 and a phase 2 site investigation on a private site, so long as you have approval for site access from the site owner. So it doesn't have to be publicly held. You can do this really on any site.
Mm-hmm.
My other question that comes to mind is, how do you ensure that if it's a county-wide program, how do you ensure that it's equitable. In other words, making sure that brown sites are looked at and potentially evaluated equitably across all of the different municipalities. What would the process be for making sure that there's that equity element?
Excellent question, and that's where Shelby comes in the task force.
Oh,
really
yeah,
it's
I
about-
would, I would do significant outreach to the County Board of Supervisors. I would probably start at the Saratoga County Economic Development Committee and ask to do a presentation about the program, about the benefits of it, about the types of sites that we are seeking to work with the supervisors to identify. And in a lot of ways, it would, in a lot of ways, it would be up to the supervisors to participate in that task force, also to offer sites. But I'm sure that we're going to get these recommendations from supervisors, and we're probably going to get recommendations from private property owners, and that we're going to be responsible for making sure that everyone is aware of sites within their own municipalities that are being considered.
And if I may also add, it's about getting input from people. It might be all the supervisors, and getting them on a list. And it's just not looking at environmental, it's also looking at the economic potential of a site. So it's about having lively discussions about what are the best sites to go after to unlock the economic potential.
Right.
Bottom line is we all benefit when you turn a brown site into a productive business through the sales tax component. And perhaps that would help you to set up a process where, which brown site's going to make the most impact, and then set up a priority scale with that in mind. But I think it'll be a little tricky to make sure that there's a fair process that everybody understands, because everyone would like to see their brown sites turned into something useful within their own towns. But like I said, we will all benefit.
Yeah. And, like, for example, there is, I'm just seeing Todd, there's a site along Route 9, a former raceway, Todd. On the north side of Route 9. And even though it's gone through a remediation process, there's probably some lingering perceptions of the value of that site or the potential liabilities of that site. And Tom, it's my understanding that those sites would still qualify for being part of this assessment program, correct?
For argument's sake, yes. I'm not knowing the details, because just the perception of contamination is enough. And the fact that one did a phase 1 and they come up with a report saying everything's been addressed is eligible.
Would that funding be able to be utilized for like a PCB encapsulated site? We've got like 3 acres down by the river, ideal recreation area, except it's it holds PCBs. Would some of that revenue be able to be used to clean that up?
Clarification, the funding cannot be used to do remediation.
Okay.
There's other programs. The funding can be used to investigate the site and do a remediation plan. And that's where it ends. The EPA then has programs for remediation. They have 2 or 3 funds for that. Then the state has the brownfield tax credit. So there's other programs. And the whole point is once you get one of these grants, you're in a family. And as long as you do well, they take care of you very well. And as I was telling Shelby, what would happen also is, used to be once a quarter, now it's like once every 6 months. All the people in New York State that have grants get together in Albany and they share war stories. And I guess it goes back to what Eric was bringing up about how are we going to make sure it's equitable? That's where Shelby can get some insight into that, because there's people from EPA there as well as all the other brownfield grant holders. And the whole point is to get these people working together, because they're all going to face similar issues.
Hey, Tom, once an assessment or a phase 1 or phase 2 is completed, is there some obligation or is there some clock that starts ticking on requiring remediation?
No. Now, just I have to clarify that, assuming if there is an imminent hazard, then maybe the DEC or EPA would get involved. But generally speaking, no. It's just these reports get done, and hopefully to open the eyes to developers. There's no real obligation unless it's something really substantial we come across. And to date, on working on brownfields, I have not come across that.
For this application, is it to do an overall assessment of potential hazardous waste sites in the county, or are the sites pre-selected? And
No.
then an assessment is done in terms of needs based on and level of the contamination for those designated geographic or building locations?
The purpose of this grant is it's referred to as a EPA Brownfield Assessment Grant. The purpose is to start with developing an inventory. So the first step would be to create a task force, which, just throwing it out there, might include some people from the county planning department, all the town supervisors. And they would come up with a list of what they consider to be brownfield sites. And maybe we would end up with 50, 60, 70 sites. And then through the process of meetings, maybe 10, 15 would become the ones that are targeted for further investigation. As someone had pointed out before, we would develop a criteria to help select the sites. And the task force guides the program along and keeps it moving forward. So no, we don't go in pre-selected. I mean, we can't have an idea for pre-selected, but in theory, the whole point is to get an inventory together. And so what you've done now is you have an inventory. So when DEC or EPA comes out with another grant, you're ready for it. Is the whole point here, is to get you ready for the next level.
Okay,
Tom, do
so-
we have enough time if we want to pursue this to get going with you would need for advanced work starting in October? Is this the right time to start?
This is a good time to start because it's one of those things that it's just got to be very thoughtful. And so what we would do is come up with a draft. So we would come up with a draft in the next couple months, shall I say. Then that we have different resources we can go to, because we can go to the EPA. The EPA will review it for us. But once they announce the grant, they can't anymore. Right. So we would get it together the next couple of months, send it amongst this group, whoever wants to look at it, send it to the EPA, get all the impact, all the things, make the changes. And then once the grant gets announced, we go to what's called the TAB, the Technical Assistance Bureaus, and then they can review it for us. So it takes a while because you got to go through a number of steps.
Thank you. Now, specifically talking to the supervisors on the board, is there any downside that you folks can see with pursuing this a little bit further? Because as Charles said, we don't want to get ahead of the supervisors in total, but is there a downside that anybody could see on this?
I certainly don't see a downside with, at the very least, presenting this to the Economic Development Committee.
I'm in 100% favor of it. I don't see a downside at all.
I think this could go a long way to letting us know where the county actually stands with some sites that are potential problems. So I agree with Darren and Eric. I think it's a good thing we'll bring it, somehow we get it up to the county before we get the cart out in front of the horse here.
Right. Todd, do you have any thoughts on it?
Yep, no, I say get it before the Economic Development Committee, and I think it's a good idea.
Okay.
Right,
Well,
excellent.
we're not asking for
Go ahead,
specific.
Sheldon.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, say go ahead. Go ahead.
No, thank you. We're not asking for specific action today. I wanted you to hear the same presentation that I've heard from Tom, just so that you could let it settle, chew on it a little bit, come back to us with any questions. And we don't want to be in a position where we're rushing to get an application in, because this, this community engagement is a very important component of getting a comprehensive application together, and we want to leave ourselves enough time to do that. So that stakeholder buy-in is an important part, but being the board, you're the most important stakeholders in the beginning of this process.
Excellent. Does anybody have any other questions for Tom at this point on this? Otherwise, we can let him go and enjoy the rest of his day. And
All right. Thank you very much for your time. If you have any
thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks,
Joe
Tom.
Dennis. Thank you. Bye
Good
now.
introduction.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Excellent. Thanks, everybody. So as we said, no actions required on the board at this point, but as Shelby and I were talking about, it's an avenue where we can do some good things for the county, potentially even make a little bit of money for ourselves by getting some management fees out of it, which is helpful as well. And so next, speaking of, we'll segue from management fees into Rocky's treasurer's report. So I lost you on my screen, Rocky. Where'd you go? Oh, you're up there now.
I'm here to show me the money.
Show you the money.
Show me the money.
So at least we're at a table. People don't move around, but they move around on the screen. I mean.
On your screen, right? Yeah. Who's ever talking? Yeah, in terms of the financial report, you were provided the statement of activities through May 8th and the other supportive documentation. And without going into the weeds, because there were a few technical questions I did have of Michelle and Shelby regarding the details in terms of specific line items. And Michelle did get back to me this morning with some responses and things like that. There were 4 items specifically, none that had any monetary significance or anything like that. It goes back in part to the discussion that we had at the last board meeting a couple weeks ago in terms of the need to reconcile the QuickBooks with the chart of accounts, with the financial statement. So it's more of a technical exercise versus something that's substantive in terms of having financial implications itself. So, and in fact, there were some minor adjustments that were made to that. And I'll be in contact with Michelle to work out some of those details associated with it. But like I said, nothing substantive as it relates to impacts on the finances. That being said,
Rocco, would that explain the negative payroll clearing account amount?
yes, that's one of the questions.
Okay, right.
Exactly.
Right now, since we opened that second checking account through Adirondack Trust to manage the payroll protection program funds, all of our payroll benefits, taxes, everything comes right out of that account. And we're also paying our rent and utilities directly from that account. And, you know, Michelle is learning that process of how to manage QuickBooks with multiple checking accounts.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure we're drawn.
No, we're not overdrawn. It was just me moving 401ks and understanding the payroll clearing and how it works.
No problem. Thanks.
Okay.
And Michelle, my manager is going to get in touch with you about your questions.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. No, the staff is doing a fantastic job in trying to reconcile all the issues that have occurred. And so it's moving forward in a positive direction. And I apologize for I'm somewhat anal when it comes to these types of issues, but I want to make sure everything is
I think it's wonderful.
you guys have got it. But on a more general issue, in terms of the budget situation, where that stands right now is that I did have a Zoom meeting with Shelby and Michelle last week to go over some initial discussions regarding the revenue and expense line items. And that also is a work in progress. That's moving forward, and the staff is working diligently on making those appropriate revisions in order to bring a revised budget first to the Audit and Finance Committee and then to the full board in the not too distant future. But once again, that continues to be a work in progress. An overarching concern I do have, and I did mention it to Michelle and Shelby, was in terms of the revenue stream from the county. And I know we talked about that. We do have a contract with the county for $500,000. And I don't know, I think Justin is on the line. But I guess, to what extent can there be, given the financial situation that we're all under at this stage of the game, government entities, can that contract be revisited in 2020? And should we take that into account as part of the look at of the revised budget? So.
I think that's a Justin question too, as to whether or not the contract can be changed midstream. Justin?
It can be proposed. Right now, the contract provides $500,000 in revenue for 2020, broken up into 4 tranches of $125,000. The intent is to have that revenue delivered in quarterly payments to the partnership along what folks assumed would be the general track of bed tax revenues over 2020. We know that's not the case, or at least we know that there's going to be some dramatic impacts felt on the bed tax this year. The good news is our contract delivers that revenue, whether or not the bed tax actual receipts fluctuate this year. That's the good news. The bad news, if you wanted to try to find some, is that the contract has a true-up mechanism each year. I think around March 1 of the following year, when the county is able to audit all of its receipts for the prior year, the intent under the contract was to true that up. If there were more revenues received than the $500,000 previously paid, you'd get more money, which is great. I think we can predict at this point safely that there may be an underpayment or under realization of bed tax receipts that would suggest a correction go the wrong way. That's where I think we would have renewed discussions at the end of this year, October, November, December, as the county is going into its next budget cycle. You know, what does our 2021 contract look like? Is there going to be a correction, whether it be adverse or to our benefit, for this potential overpayment and under receipt of revenues? And how can we tackle 2021 in terms of how that contract will look? Do we want to get into payments that are actual quarterly receipts? Things like that we can look at. I'm not sure, given, and we have supervisors on the phone and on this call, I'm not sure if a mid-year adjustment is something that would come up to their radar at this point, given the myriad of other financial and pandemic-related stuff that they're tackling. But it's worthy, I think, of a discussion at our board level and with leadership, with Shelby, you know, actively engaging with the county and kind of forecasting where things are going to go for the second part of 2020 and how we might, you know, restructure things in 2021 so we don't have an adverse hit, a correction, the county looking for money back, or a way that we can structure the 2021 year in a way that works the county to the greatest advantage for it financially and also to our greatest advantage to make sure that there's a level playing field and a meaningfully predictive amount of operating revenue for the partnership.
Since we have 4 supervisors currently on the call, consider yourself informed.
Hey, Justin, Todd Kuzniers. Quick question. I want to make sure I either heard you right or understand what you were describing correctly. When you say the contract delivers an amount, is the language predicated on the fact that the county actually receives that level, a minimum level of bed tax, or is it predicated on the fact that what actually is received by the county? In other words,
good question.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah, it's a good question. The way that it was drawn up, and obviously there was this stuff was fast moving around the budget cycle last December. You're fully aware, I'm sure.
Right.
There was an adjustment made, and the way that the contract was struck up was under the assumption, which at the time was perfectly reasonable and rational, that the 2020 bed tax revenues would be somewhere on par with the 2019, with the $500,000 number being kind of the bogey at the time.
Right.
For stability's sake, the contract was set up with the county to provide quarterly payments irrespective of actual receipts, because it takes time for the county each quarter to look back and see what was actually collected. Sometimes there's some late payers, the folks that actually pay bed tax. So it's hard to get into a rhythm of exact payments for the county to distribute revenue to the partnership on an actual receive basis. So the contract was set up to establish 4 quarterly payments at $125,000 apiece, irrespective of actual receipts, given the time and rhythm of collection. And then there's the true up. But we've had this true up in the contract since its inception. Under the county law, there's a nuance. If they give you if the county gives us marketing contract revenues and we don't spend them all, the county law requires us to give whatever amount not spent back. We mimicked the same true-up mechanism in the contract saying if bed tax exceeds, we're owed a little bit more. And if bed tax doesn't hit, there may be a reconciliation that we'd have to look at. There's obviously a blood in the stone analogy here. There's nothing to sweep back, but I think the concept here is we look at the 2021 calendar year and fiscal year for both the partnership and the county. There's a way that we can take care of that reconciliation and bake it into 2021.
Okay, so the true up language is not necessarily in this year's contract for, in other words, if the bed tax was significantly less, the partnership would not have to come up with a difference or give it back for 2020.
It is there. But again, it's a situation where we don't know where the actual receipts are going to fall this year.
Right.
I think it's safe to assume that with the track at risk, there's going to be an impact. We just don't know what that might be. So I think as those revenues track over the summer on a quarterly basis, I think we'd all be well served to talk with the county treasurer and forecast and keep an eye on those things. So we can get a sense of if a reconciliation is necessary, how we take care of it in 2021. It would be something that would be March or April of 2021. By then, we'll be 3 months into the 2021 contract. So there may be a way to address that. So,
Justin,
go ahead.
I'm looking for a clearer answer. So is the true up optional? Is it vague or is it mandatory in the language of the contract, or is it silent?
I can pull it up right now. I have my system open, and if we can circle back, I might need a quick second to see how hard the language is. It was drafted at the time, the intent was to make sure that it was compulsory because we thought there'd be more money. I mean, the tax base was growing, trending higher each year. So, but
Well,
pandemics being what they are.
What the intent was, I'm interested in what the language says.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking up.
I think in the meantime, from the board's perspective and looking at the finances and the like, is that we be very careful in terms of our expenditures during 2020. So if in fact we could have a carryover into the next fiscal year, or if we don't use all the county money, if you will, if we have to get a give back, maybe not 2020, because the contract says we're okay for this year, but plan for 2021 that, okay, we didn't spend a full amount, $500,000, that it makes us in a better position for 2021 in terms of any cuts that may take place. And in the meantime, the staff appears to be their due diligence in seeking out other financial revenue streams to help support the organization as well moving forward. So I think from the finance committee's perspective is a continual planning that yes, we have that money, but that doesn't mean we should be spending it. We should do everything we can and must do to reduce the expenses of the organization in order to make sure we're whole, planning for the future in 2021.
Mhm. If I could make one point too, in the past, it's my understanding that not only the room occupancy tax, but the general fund money was front loaded and given to the partnership at the beginning of the year. And the difference between then and now is now we submit quarterly vouchers. So we don't get all the money in one tranche.
Right.
No, I understand that. I just want to start with the basis of what the legal document says.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll turn that right around in an email in a few seconds.
Can you send me a copy of it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Then we don't have to waste the meeting time.
Thank you.
Yep.
Do we
Thank
need
That's all I have.
do we have a review of approval to pay the bills?
So I'd ask Rocco, are we solvent?
Yes, as we speak.
I move it then.
Thank you.
Thank you. Second,
I'll second.
in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, next we have old business mainly having to do with G&G lighting. And I know Shelby, we got a lot to go over here, and I know that's why Matt's on here. So Matt, good seeing you again. Thanks for attending today. So
Good seeing you, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
I'm going to let you, Shelby, determine how you want to go about doing this, since we got a lot of different issues here. So I don't know if we're going to go right into Matt, or you want to do a little intro first.
I'm going to do a quick intro. Matt Grattan is from the University of Albany and our innovation hotspot for the Capital Region. Matt oversees the Startup New York application, the process on behalf of the University of Albany. And he actually reached out to us last year in November about a client that the college was working with in their engineering department. We don't hear a lot about the engineering department at University of Albany, but I believe we will more moving forward. But G&G Lighting, which traditionally was making lighting fixtures for car washes and other businesses, was getting into the food production and FDA certified space, and the University of Albany has been working with them on engineering concepts for this. The benefits of this company getting into this space can be quantified with jobs, with capital investment. It doesn't seem as large as I think the overall benefit of collaboration between the academic sector and the private sector. And I think Matt can speak more to that. He can probably talk a little bit more about the tax credits involved in this partnership, of why the Saratoga Partnership is involved in this as a local development corporation who can facilitate. Matt?
Thank you, Shelby. And first off, I just want to extend a appreciation to the Prosperity Partnership for really taking a deep look at this opportunity and really being willing to partner with us and with Empire State Development and with G&G LED Lighting on this project. I think for many of you, and I know even for Shelby, when I talked about the company initially to Shelby and Marty back in November, I think most of the folks at the Prosperity Partnership weren't really familiar with G&G. They're, one of these companies which we know exist in many communities that are really a small company. I'll call them a stage 2 company. They have a product that is in the market. They've been very successful, as Shelby mentioned, in the car wash industry. Their main product line is waterproof LED lighting. That, as we know, lighting advancements have moved into significant volumes of LED, but making LED lighting that is waterproof is a bit more of a little engineering concept and trick that is there's not too many manufacturers in that space. So they've got a nice market share in the car wash industry, to the point where they have 17 employees in Half Moon, in the Half Moon Industrial Park and the Abley properties. But they approached us about expansion opportunities and wanted to consider the Startup New York program to do that. Now, the main reason we needed to integrate the Prosperity Partnership as a nonprofit economic development entity into this process is that in order for G&G to be considered for Startup New York approval, the space that they were going to expand into must be designated as a tax-free area space in any college's Startup New York campus plan. And I know Penny, your other board member, could teach this class for me because she runs the Startup New York program for Hudson Valley as well. But when I approached ESD about looking at adding this space in Half Moon, if you recall, some of you may or may not be familiar, there's requirements in the Startup New York regulations that reference proximity, that the properties must be within a reasonable proximity of the campus. The 1 mile rule is really what many people knew of and heard of. There are exceptions to that 1 mile rule, but when we look at where the University of Albany sits and where we look at Half Moon, we're talking about roughly 10 to 12 miles. ESD would normally balk at that in terms of a distance to allow the tax-free area space to be approved in our campus plan. However, there is this stipulation that allows for property to be added to a campus's plan if they work with a nonprofit agency to be able to be kind of an intermediary to control the space, and then in turn around and lease it to the Startup New York tenant. And when that is the case, basically that proximity rule is extended that much more. And really, we just need to then focus on how the relationship will be established between the academic unit, the university, our students, and the company. And so, as Shelby mentioned, as they get into new product lines in food process manufacturing, those facilities, and we hear of it even more now in this situation of COVID. We've read stories of numbers of meat packing plants being shut down as it relates to instances of COVID, but also being able to sanitize and clean those food production facilities really requires, and more efficient facilities will have waterproof LED lighting in them. So there's a new market opportunity that G&G has associated with that. So just to quantify their what they have indicated in their Startup New York application is over a 5-year period, they are projecting the creation of 7 net new jobs and an investment of a little bit over $2.25 million. And most of that investment is planned to be out in what they indicated in year 4, but could be even a little bit earlier, which would be roughly about a $2 million investment of a larger facility. So they do have projections that will look to have them possibly move out of these 2 adjacent facilities in Half Moon and be looking at additional larger space based on how orders come in and how business is associated with these new product lines. And I'll mention that 7 net new jobs may not be an earth-shattering number to you, but I always coach my companies, and Penny could attest to this as well. I'm sure she does the same in Hudson Valley, that we always coach our companies to come in with their projections more on the conservative side. When entering into the Startup New York program, there is a process to amend your application each year to adjust to more real-time current year occupational projections, because that is the biggest challenge in the program. Is you're asked to give a 5-year projection, but as you know, as you get out past year 2, year 3, year 4, those projections for job growth, too many other factors start factoring into those. But I do anticipate that 7 is a conservative number for them, and I think they can be more in the lines of 10 to 15, depending on, again, how orders go and how business goes as they get into this new product. So I believe you have some of the lease documents that you're going to be looking at. Normally, the relationship, once we get into the lease arrangements, the university doesn't necessarily get involved in that. But if you do recall, we do have a signed and approved memorandum of understanding between the Prosperity Partnership and the University at Albany and the SUNY Research Foundation that basically allows the space to be included in our campus plan. And that was the first step. And our campus plan amendment was approved back in February, and we submitted G&G's application then for Startup New York. And I checked in with ESD today. We are expecting any day to hear on the approval of G&G into Startup New York. And once that approval is in place, then they would actually be able to begin occupying the space. So that's why it's important. And I'm very appreciative of the fact that you'll be considering these lease documents so that they can get into that space and begin working more on the design and production in this new product line.
And, this new direction that they're going into the food production industry has actually allowed them to remain open as an essential business. So it's turned out to be fortuitous, at least.
Correct.
Yep. So does anyone have any questions? I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna ask the same. I was gonna ask the same thing. Thank you, Matt. Does anybody have any questions for Matt about G&G and what they're doing?
Good explanation, Matt. Couldn't have done better myself. Great job.
Sure you could have, Penny.
So if no one has any questions, I wanted Matt to be here to give an overview and talk about the university partnership. And again, some of these things that can't necessarily be quantified with 7 jobs or $2 million in capital investment, which is significant, but also that relationship that they have with the company and the collaboration with their engineering department. Also, you know, it gives us a great opportunity to retain some of these students that are studying at the University of Albany in the engineering school. They get actively involved with a small company, they get involved in product development, and next thing you know, they become permanent residents and gainfully employed by one of our companies. So it's a nice way to develop that workforce talent pipeline here, but that's one of those things that, you know, doesn't always get reported in the newspaper.
Yeah, thank you, Shelby. If I could just add, you are spot on, because as I'm sure many of you know, the Startup New York program has not necessarily had the greatest reception in necessarily in the media, and Penny could tell you the same thing. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with the program. There's more love than hate, but there are aspects of the program that I feel, you know, could be improved. But G&G has been an outstanding partner right from the outset, and we have already had very deep discussions with our department chair in our computer and electrical engineering department, and they're working already on the design of capstone projects that our students would be engaged in. And that's those additional academic benefits. So those are what we call the academic benefits. Obviously the business gets the tax benefits, which the hope is that they reinvest those into their business. But the academic benefits, to be able to retain our workforce, the opportunities for internships, the opportunities for research collaborations and research projects, sponsored research, those are really what we look for. And those are really at the foundation of what the New York relationship is about.
Great.
Okay.
So as long as Justin's on the call, still, we have some documents that we will need to look at and review. I believe everything has been sent to everyone on Friday. Justin?
Yeah, I can do just a quick topical overview. We gave a precursor or an introduction to this at the last board meeting, and discussions at that time were centered a little bit around, you know, what are our internal policies for facilitating this program? We hadn't adopted any previously, so with Shelby's assistance, we put together a proposed policy document for the partnership. And to the extent that we receive any additional applications or requests to facilitate these campus amendments, we would have an internal policy to engage with folks on a fair and transparent and even-handed way. The policy that we've put together deals with minimum documentation that we would require to remain on a non-recourse basis, what kind of administrative fees we would charge to provide this facilitation. And even though it reads a little legalese, there's a couple of pages on basic insurance requirements. To the extent that we're dealing with a landlord, like we are here, they would have to insure us with minimum amounts, and the operator themselves, like G&G, would also have to affirmatively insure us during the life of the leases. So that is a policy consideration for the board that can be taken up under a separate resolution if the board's comfortable with that, or if the governance committee wants to tool with it, that's fine too, or it could be a living document that you touch upon from time to time. On G&G specifically, we have an authorizing resolution prepared in your packets to move forward with that project that Matt outlined and Shelby provided details on. In essence, an Ably affiliate would lease us the building and we immediately lease it to G&G. Both entities insure us and indemnify us for any liabilities. And our role is simply to affirmatively collect rent on a monthly basis and forward it to the Ablys. And for the life of the lease, which starts off with a 2-year term, we receive $1,000 a year for that administrative facilitation. And if they renew the lease, we'll have opportunities to continue generating that outside income over time.
Justin, suppose there's this facility gets built and there's an accident of some sort and there's liability against the company and the company defaults. Is there recourse to us?
If there's like a slip and fall or a scaffold type thing, it's a good analogy. In the first instance, we have indemnifications from both entities, the Ablys through their special purpose entity that owns the building, and then from G&G proper, the operating concern. Both entities are providing insurance with a minimum of a $5 million umbrella on both sides. So we have affirmatively bound insurance behind the indemnities that are being provided by each company. So to an extent, we have a very large policy that should cover any incidents of industrial accidents or otherwise.
I guess you didn't answer my question.
I'm sorry. If they default, we would look to the insurance company.
Yeah, but would we be in the chain of liability if those entities were unable? Their insurance can be canceled. I'm not suggesting we don't do it. I just want to know whether we're in the chain of liability or not.
No, we're not getting into the chain of title. The county clerks, usually PI lawyers, will chase any ownership entities, and sometimes they implead IDAs in these instances, which never sticks because they're not entitled and they don't have any operating powers or concerns. So the liability would rest within the indemnities from the companies and then the insurance policies. We would never have any role or any oversight, maintenance, or responsibility to maintain the facility.
So all we do is we rent from Abele and then we in turn lease it to G&G.
Yes.
So,
That's right.
and the only administrative function we would have is collecting the money, and then we're a middleman. We collect the money and we send it to Abele.
That's correct.
So I don't know, Charles. I mean, I think it seems like we're pretty safe, but in terms of whether we could wind up as a defendant in a complaint, definitely, I think. I mean,
Yeah.
if we're a lessor in certain respects, yeah.
I
But
also
that's
that if we have two entities insuring us, we're probably okay. But I think we probably are in the chain of liability. I'm sure if it came down to it, we would be included, whether they won or not, would be another story.
But we're pretty safe.
And I said it sometimes it occurs where, and this is an IDA transaction that's just modified to fit these circumstances. Sometimes IDAs get impled in litigation and personal injury claims, and the insurance carriers quickly plead us out because we really have no role or really have no nexus to the claim itself. So to answer Charles's question, people can sue you for anything, whether or not there's any standing or any potential liability. I would say that is very nil.
Yeah. I also have to just report, and this is neither here nor there, someone could slip on someone's soda or something, but it's a pretty low key work environment with very light assembly. And if anything, like just basic racking in the production space. So it's not like your typical manufacturing environment. And I've been into some heavy duty manufacturing environments. So I think our risk is probably on the lower side, but there is always risk.
Well, and I think it's not only an industrial accident, it could be a fire. It could also, I don't know how this coronavirus liability is going to play out.
Correct.
But we would have no responsibility for any kind of operations at this facility. So we certainly couldn't be affirmatively negligent. The only way we could be held liable is on some sort of, ownership, non-negligent sort of theory, which, seems remote. So, I mean, I don't know. It seems to me that we're safe enough in terms of the indemnities and the insurance.
And we're not liable if G&G ever fails to pay the rent. We don't have to pay it to Abley, correct?
That's correct. We're only responsible to transfer any rentals we receive. If there's a default, in other words, if G&G doesn't pay the partnership and we have nothing to forward, we'll let Abley know. And if Abley is unable to get G&G to correct that default, we would simply terminate our leases and step back. And then there would be a direct relationship like normal between Abley and G&G, and we'd be on our way. Likewise, if G&G were to be disqualified under the Startup New York program for whatever reason, failure to file a form, it's kind of like the old Empire Zone program. We would likewise be able to just step back and say, if there's no program to facilitate, there's no role for us here. So it's an easily collapsible structure that under normal circumstances, they pay their rent on time, and we're never really going to have an awareness of this other than paying rent. But if they get out of the program, or if there's a disruption in payment of rentals, we'd be able to just step back politely and tell them to take care of it themselves.
Do we literally have to receive the rent check from G&G, or can it go directly to Abley and we just get our piece?
We have to receive it.
That's what I thought.
I have a question for Matt while he's still on there. What was their statement of consequences for the program, Matt? What did they say they would do if they had any default?
I coach everyone, Penny, to proportional recovery. Yeah, I mean, I frankly, I don't know why anyone would choose any other option. Sorry, Penny and I are talking a little side shop.
But
For you guys, it probably doesn't, you don't understand what, but this is the clawback provision. When a company applies into the program, there's a document called the Statement of Consequences, which outlines the clawback provision request, and there's basically three options, and one of them is proportional recovery, which means if they don't hit the projected number of net new jobs, the state can come back after them for a proportion ratio of the goal target that they did hit, and that portion they didn't hit would be the taxable amount. The other two are suspension and termination from the program. So really, if the company has an off year and they miss goals, the goals associated with that, they have an opportunity in the following year to make up for that. And so proportional recovery is what they chose.
Shelby, do we need a motion for this?
Well, we have three. Justin, should we go through every single, we have the authorizing resolution for the Startup New York program and G&G lighting project. We have the Startup New York program policies. I think this is what Justin was talking about in the beginning, and it allows us to have an effective program policy so that we're not one-offing every single one of these that comes in the door. And this includes the administrative fee requirements, the base level fee, the agreement that they will pay our legal bills, and also a scalable fee as it relates to bigger projects. Because if we're looking at a multi-million-dollar or multi-billion-dollar project, we probably don't want to be charging the same fee structure. The transaction document requirements, insurance requirements. So again, we've just come up with a baseline policy so that we have one in place. And then from there, I think we'll look at the master lease and the sublease. Correct, Justin? Or can we have?
Yeah, we can go through those. We can go through those in greater detail if you'd like, but I think we've hit the high points. I'd defer to any board questions or any level of detail you want to go through. That's fine.
Okay. So tell us the order of the resolutions that makes the most sense so that we're doing this properly.
Sure. Probably makes sense to set the policy at the outset, just in terms of order. So to the extent that the board is comfortable with the proposed policy we put together, if we can get a motion and a second and to adopt that, that would be great. And then we could move into the resolution for G&G itself.
Okay.
Okay, and the program policy is on what page? Looks like 20, 19 or 20 of the PDF.
Michelle, do you have that handy where the program policy, the number is? Hold on, let me look at it.
I think it's 19 or 20.
It's page 20.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Looking at paper.
Well, mine's a lot because I'm looking at a very long monitor, so I got a couple pages on one, so it doesn't scroll through the same order necessarily.
It's a quarter of a way through of the way through the document package. It's
I have 16 on my phone, so it's,
But 20 is the actual program. It's not the first document in that packet.
I got your program policies. I see it. 20.
And they're going to be, depending on the size of what you're viewing it on, it's going to change the size.
But it's not the leading document in that section.
Got it.
Yeah, in my PDF, it's page 20 of 78.
So we need a motion to accept the program policies.
I'll make the motion to accept the program policies. It's Josh.
Thank you, Josh. Second.
I'll second it.
Penny, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you all. That motion carries. And then Justin, the next one you want to do is one starting at page 16, the authorizing resolution. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yeah, it recaps our initial activities that were adopted on December 16th to enter into an MOU with SUNY for this purpose, and then authorizes a specific transaction for the benefit of G&G LED LLC. In essence, authorizes the partnership to enter into the transaction, which entails a master lease, leaseback agreement, and environmental compliance agreement. Working copies of which you have in your package as well.
So we have a motion to accept the authorizing resolution.
So moved.
Charles, thank you. Second.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Darren. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. And then Justin, did we need to do the lease then separately as well?
No, those are just included for information purposes. If there's any specific questions, they were just provided as a courtesy for the board to review.
Okay. So then do we get through all the items that needed a vote then? I think we did. Shelby's giving me the heads up, so I guess so.
We've made it. We made it.
Okay, so
Thank you.
thank you, everybody, and thank you, Matt, for appreciate your time and
Great. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I want to extend my appreciation to the board. You know, this is a great company. I think we'll hopefully be seeing them again with some further growth strategies. So my appreciation to the Prosperity Partnership Board. Thank you very much.
thank you, and best of luck to them.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Matt. Thanks,
And
Matt.
then I think next we have Shelby's present report.
We do have the president's report. Hold on one second. Oh, gosh, where should we start? So we have Mary back. Mary's returned 2 weeks ago, and we have been able to get her up and running fairly quickly. We've given her administrative access to all of our files. Luckily, since she was an employee previously, this made the onboarding process a lot easier for us. So, you know, thanks so much to our team and Michelle specifically for getting her up and running so quickly. She was given a list of 300 businesses that responded to our business impact survey when COVID first came out. She has been breaking those down by industry as well as geography so that we're covering a decent amount of ground throughout Saratoga County. And I believe that it includes everyone from retail to nonprofit, e-commerce, transportation, logistics, farming, manufacturing, as part of that contact list. And, you know, she's been able to make contact with at least 37 of these companies. And, you know, we were just talking before this call, she's talking to a company in Ballston Spa that is actually in growth mode as well, that is looking at making new investment. in equipment as well as workforce. I think something that we've also done is, had her participate in as much training to get her up to speed with the federal programs. And I think her experience, not only with the federal government and some federal programming, gave her unique insight into some of this. But, I could probably let Mary speak for herself for a moment, just to talk about how you're doing. Is that okay, Kev?
That's great.
Okay, thank you. Mary?
First, thanks for having me back. I feel that this is the place I belong, so I appreciate that. My comfort level with SBA is certainly coming into fruition here to help me talking to the companies and things. Also, exposure as a commercial banker. The conversations we have, one thing I can tell you about the companies, they're, I would say, medium-sized to small. The sad part is that people are worried. There are people that don't know how they're going to pay their bills, even if they have an EIDL or a PPP. They don't know how they're going to pay their bills in June, July, August, as we're reopening, because they will be limited in how much foot traffic they can have in their location, whether it's retail, whether it's a restaurant. They're worried, but I can tell you the people here in Saratoga County are hustling like crazy to find ways to get money and to bring in cash and to keep their employees working hard. It really is inspiring, but there are people that are genuinely worried. Unless, as I was saying in the beginning, those of you, unless you're working in a liquor store, because then you're making money hands over fist and everybody's happy. But I spoke to David Wood recently and hustling, trying to make it work. Agriculture, the retail folks are trying to have plans ready so their places are clean. Restaurants, how do you get the place clean and keep it clean? And how do you set up a procedure for contract tracing? My heart goes out to the lawyers for corporations right now, because to reopen a business and to have them adhere to all the regulations, ADA, Disabilities Act, other regulations, and yet still reopen and make it a safe place to work. It's really, it's hard work, and they need access to information. And I think that's where Shelby and the rest of the team come to play, is that we got to get the information out to them. But as I said, I think I'm up to 45 right now, but it takes a while to get through the list of 300, but it's, they're hustling. They're working really hard.
Yeah. Something Mary's also doing is she's collecting a list of everyone in Saratoga County that's actually supplying in whether making, manufacturing, or importing personal protection equipment. And, I think as we talked in the last board meeting, something that she's also doing is business development for the Global Markets Program. So, Mary, have you seen some general opportunity there?
Yes, there's several of the companies I've spoken with. Part of their difficulties right now are because they can't get their imports in from India or China, Peru. They are having troubles. The ports are a mess in some of these countries. So there are opportunities to advise companies going forward on how to handle the problems in the global marketplace. The one company that's looking to expand is already selling in Canada. So we may think that many of our companies aren't exporting or importing, but they are. And they're not all going to bring their manufacturing back, because their business model is to make use of products that can only get overseas, or that's where they can source it. And I think it's part and parcel of our business expansion and growth strategy, because companies do play in other markets. They just don't play in the United States.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So things are going very well there. I think Rocky had talked to you about some basic administration in the ways that we're trying to look for resources and shore up our financial footing. Michelle has been working aggressively with Capital CFO. We've been looking at recasting the budget, and we provided a very rough draft to Rocky last week that we will be presenting to the Audit and Finance Committee. Something that I did talk with the city of Saratoga Springs, and I also spoke with Rocky about as well, but they have their community block grant economic development fund that the applications just went out last week. and their Community Economic Development Director, Lindsay Connors, sent out the application and guidelines to us. We could potentially, she strongly encouraged that we could apply for this funding for economic development purposes. And since there are so many businesses, specifically in the Saratoga Springs city, it was actually pretty highly represented in our survey, that we could do very focused business development assistance and technical assistance to this community. So this could be the basis for an application. I think the upper limit is $50,000, but as Rocky is saying, it's extremely competitive. So we'd have to manage expectations for that. But that's something that we're looking at potentially applying for. You've heard the presentation from HRP Associates, and I do believe I've also communicated to you at the last board meeting that to complement the Next Wave Communities and Business Retention and Expansion Program, we submitted a grant application, which would bring in to us roughly $95,000, not all to be used directly for administration, but would cover a significant amount of payroll and overhead for the time devoted to some of these programs, as well as it'll give us enough resources to bring in other experts, subject matter experts, grant writing experts, to help make these plans more robust. And also, dealing with the COVID, if communities are targeting certain businesses, we want to make sure that we are doing really good business outreach and bringing a lot of tools to the table, because I think, compared to 3 months ago, businesses are in a much different position and will probably continue to be in a difficult position over the course of the next year when this program would unroll. So we have that. I have a meeting on Wednesday with a bioenergy project that I've been working with in the town of Half Moon for quite some time. They actually returned this week and are looking at feedstocks related to food waste. There's a state mandate that requires businesses producing, I believe, at least 2 million pounds of food waste a year to provide recycling for that. And it doesn't make a lot of sense for a lot of small to medium sized types of businesses to all invest in their own anaerobic digesters. So having, it's like a chicken and the egg kind of process, having a company that has a good technology that can make money off of doing that and having the feedstock available is definitely a challenge. I think this is a project that both SEDC and us can work on. Let's see. I just talked to SCORE today. It looks like we are looking at possibly providing a lot more focused, and I'm talking a lot about small businesses because right now we're seeing that they are having the most severe impact right now of COVID, and they are the least connected generally with the economic development system. So as many resources that we can provide in this very unprecedented time is critically helpful to make sure that our Main Street communities that a lot of our small businesses represented are not going under. And this takes a lot of collaboration. We've been working very, very closely with the Saratoga County Chamber of Commerce, SEDC, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, City Center Authority, which has actually been stockpiling and collecting personal protection equipment. And we're actually going to be putting together recovery kits for small businesses and ensuring that businesses are able to understand what's going on right now with reopening plans and have the ability and means to reopen safely is absolutely critical. And I think, a month ago, I think the big question out there was, what is the federal recovery stimulus package going to look like, and how do businesses get access to that? And I think our local banks have done a tremendous job getting that money out on the street. The SBA has done a great job. We see Steve everywhere. Steve could probably give us an update on how things are going. I know there's still a decent amount of money still out there in the system. Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Shelby. Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on what you said about SCORE. All of our resource partners, including SCORE, have gotten funding from the CARES Act, so they're really going to be ramping it up more than they ever have. That also includes the Small Business Development Center locally down in Albany. They also work up at SUNY Adirondack. The New York SBDC just got $11 million just to help with COVID recovery. So there's going to be a lot of resources there that we can tap into. The one thing I will say is there's still over $100 billion left in the Paycheck Protection Program. The applications have fallen off dramatically over the last week because most of the demand has been met. So if you have any small businesses or eligible nonprofits that are interested in taking advantage of this, haven't yet taken advantage, have them reach out to lenders. I can just say Adirondack Trust has been one of the absolute superstar lenders we have in the program in Region 2, but there's a lot of them. Saratoga National's another. There's a lot of them out there. So if you know of any small businesses that still want to participate, there's plenty of money left. So thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Yeah. And I think there's a decent amount of education and guidance that we can help businesses with, and the Small Business Development Center especially, they've been phenomenal to work with about how businesses are monitoring how they're using these funds to ensure that what they expected to be a forgivable loan ends up coming to fruition that way. And, you know, we understand that some of the guidance and direction has changed and evolved a bit, but, you know, there's room for us all to work together to make sure that we're just communicating as much as possible. And Steve, that the remaining funds was actually in our newsletter this morning, and we got a lot of feedback from that. So let me see. I am actively working with SEDC and Center for Economic Growth on selecting a potential consultant to work with us on doing a site and market analysis for Luther Forest Technology Campus and Saratoga Technology and Energy Park and adjacent property in the towns of Stillwater and Malta. And, you know, Darren, I believe, is aware of this. This is kind of an extension of our Next Wave Communities plan. We've gotten an initial draft proposal from a group that one of the gentlemen we have a lot of background with him. Actually, two of them, Dick Sheehy and John Frank. One worked for MW Group and another worked for a competitive organization, but they're very familiar with the site. They are very familiar with the attraction process of AMD, which later became Global Foundries. And I think that considering the fact that the entire industry is, for the most part, consolidated and changed, and given this COVID, I sent an email just before the call about President Trump, as well as representatives from some of our largest chip makers, are now seeing real market opportunities for bringing chip manufacturing back to the United States, and it could position us very uniquely in this region, given our assets and given the fact that we have such a large anchor here. So that is exciting, and the timing is great. There could be another grant application that filters through the Saratoga partnership if we do something like this. And we could also potentially be asking the Industrial Development Agency to chip in on some of this market analysis, mainly because they are investing in a 20+ acre site that sits at the center of the campus, which is, you know, infrastructure is now being extended to that. So, you know, they would be part of the marketing team for that. So more information will be coming out there, but Darren, do you have anything to add? Oh, you're muted.
Thanks for sending that article out this morning, Shelby. My town board was very happy to see that. So it's great news. If we could make some use and go back to the original plan was getting, you know, some more chip manufacturers in there, that'd be great.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see what happens. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. And the world has changed since 20 years ago when this was developed, and it's time to take a look at the market again and the opportunities that we have. So I think that I have Oh, I'm working on a perception survey with the partnership group that I was just referring to, with a group called Mind Genomics. They're based out of Saratoga Springs, but they work heavily with IBM, Amazon, a lot of companies to essentially understand what an individual's perception might be and their consumer preferences might be. The purpose of this is to understand how Saratoga County is supposed to be positioning itself for a tourism season that may or may not occur, and how we can best salvage the tourism season in the best way possible and reposition Saratoga County or Saratoga County and Saratoga Springs as a destination of health and respite. So we are working actively with the Convention and Tourism Bureau, the Chamber of Commerce. Actually, Randy Matavier from Applied Materials, which is a supplier of Global Foundries, is one of the leaders on this with me, and more. Sorry about that. I was just checking my text. But we should, and we're also working with SPAC, which has, SPAC has got shows canceling. They just canceled the Jazz Fest. We're working with the Saratoga Casino and Raceway, which is a confined space, and they're very, very nervous about opening their doors and how receptive their clientele are going to be to things like temperature checks when they walk in the door, having to wear gloves, being spaced out within the confines of that building. So, and there are a lot of businesses that we're working with that are really not only going to need the solid information from OSHA and the Center for Disease Control and some of our health and safety measures that we're going to be trying to implement locally, but they also need to know what the market is going to bear and how they can reposition their business to be the most profitable during these extremely challenging times. So does anyone have any questions?
Shelby, I saw something, I didn't get a chance to read the article, that the casinos in Vegas are coming up with some plans. Is there anything there that the Saratoga Casino and Raceway can take a look at?
I'm sure Skip has already been pretty deep into that himself, but I think I haven't seen those yet, Kevin, honestly, but Skip is very, very concerned about the health and safety aspect and people's tolerance for, going into the casino, basically like full masks, full gloves, temperature check, hand sanitizer everywhere. They want to create the most beneficial experience to their customers without actually scaring them. I mean, it's a legitimate.
It's a fine line.
It is a fine line. And, SPAC is also like, how many times do you clean your restroom? What's going to be acceptable, not only perception wise, but safety wise, when you have thousands of people coming through? They have the benefit of an outdoor amphitheater. And, how would they have to reorganize the indoor amphitheater and change seating, every other seat or every other row being filled? I mean, there's a significant loss of revenue there. So it's like, how do you reimagine and rethink Saratoga? And how do you rethink some of our assets that we have here and, position ourselves for our outdoor open spaces and our historic places to go? I mean, this could provide nice tourism opportunities for towns that didn't necessarily see a great benefit. And obviously Saratoga Racecourse. And, I think Charles, you wrote a beautifully eloquent letter that was published, what was it, last week, about Saratoga Racecourse and whether or not it should open. And Charles, would you like to talk about that at all?
No, but I'd be happy to send a copy of it to anybody who'd like to see it.
Okay, or we can circulate it around. Yeah, so that's kind of it's some of what we're working on. It's been extremely busy. I think I've been asked to participate on a webinar on Thursday with the Capital District Regional Planning Commission about our recovery efforts collectively. And I was just invited this morning by the Saratoga County Board of Supervisors to be on one of their Wednesday Facebook Live webinars to talk about what's going on here in Saratoga County and how we're doing outreach and assisting businesses. And it seems like the environment, the landscape is changing literally every day, and staying on top of that has been a monumental task, but a worthwhile task. To roll back to kind of our budget and looking at ways to consolidate costs, we were, Saratoga Chamber, Chad Shimkus reached out to me on Monday of last week and asked if we would be interested in potentially consolidating or co-locating space with the Chamber of Commerce. We haven't gotten any specific information about, you know, what our footprint would look like within their offices at 28 Clinton Street in Saratoga Springs. You know, I worked in that building for 13 years, so I'm very familiar with it. You know, I think as we're experiencing what it's like to do remote working, I think we can see some opportunities that this could make a lot of sense for us. There's a lot of opportunities to share costs, things like our copiers and general infrastructure. I think we're pretty well established with our laptops in the cloud that we could basically work about anywhere. I think the challenge is having a boardroom to accommodate board meetings, and you know, they have a pretty sizable boardroom. So I just wanted to, I mean, I think it's going to be very important to us to make sure that this doesn't have any impacts on the Saratoga County contract and our relationship working with the Saratoga County Board of Supervisors. And, you know, first and foremost, I'm going to be looking out for the needs of our team here to make sure that we can work as a cohesive unit wherever we work. And, you know, it's financially, it's got to make sense. But I think there could be a lot of benefits to it too. So,
Thanks, Bob.
yeah.
I just want to remind everybody that I'm the president of that board as well. And prior to Todd reaching out to Shelby, Todd and I had a conversation about this as well. It works well for the chamber, and it potentially can work well for us. It says we try to look for ways for all these organizations to try to streamline budgets and try to work more efficiently. And particularly since the way Shelby, Todd, Daryl, and some of the others have been working so well together, it does make a lot of sense of moving forward. So, but if we are going to move forward on anything, because I'm chair or president, whatever, on both of these boards, I will not be voting on anything, just to let everybody know.
Yeah. And we've also had discussions. We haven't had a unity committee meeting yet. We were going to talk about having one on April 25th, but we already had a board meeting. There have been discussions about us emerging and co-locating potentially with SEDC. And, you know, I talk to Dennis just about every single Monday. He has very deep seated concerns about being a public authority and being subject to Open Meetings Law, Public Authorities Accountability Act. And, you know, I can also fill someone in if they have any questions about it. But they're actually going so far as to get a legal opinion about being subject to the Public Authorities Accountability Act due to their recent contracting with Saratoga County to provide marketing services. So it might not be an option to co-locate with SEDC, but this would get us close, you know, because SEDC is on the same floor of that building. And it could provide a lot more opportunity for that kind of collaborative work without, you know, sharing the same server, sharing the same copier, being, you know, in the same offices where records are kept, which, you know, could be a potential concern for them. So does anyone have any thoughts?
Shelby, you said they're going to get the legal opinion. Do they have, implying that they have not gotten it yet?
I think he said that it might be almost ready. It might have already been presented to their board, but that at some point at the Unity Committee that it would be presented by their board chairman, John Munter. But I mean, I can see that probably not working out in our favor. And it's not condemnation. It's just, you know, I think Dennis is gently warning me that it's probably not going to work out in our favor to to be able to successfully merge at this point.
So that kind of makes the Unity Committee unnecessary.
I love the Unity Committee. I think if it keeps us all honest and keeps us collaboratively working together, I think it's a very important thing to help mend a relationship that's needs mending.
Well,
we haven't received a report.
My Unity Committee was to try to bring some unity, and if you can't bring any unity, I'm not sure. I think that might be a waste of time to have another committee, in effect, babysitting two organizations. But that's just my point of view.
Understood.
Well, hopefully that's not what it comes to. Does anybody else have any questions for Shelby on the president's report, or where we're working on?
I have just a couple of questions for Shelby or Mary. There's a few businesses in town that are having a lot of trouble getting either through to the support that they need. I have a couple of sole proprietors. They're the only people that work in their shops, and they just cannot get through to unemployment or anywhere else. They're just having a hard time getting through. Is there somebody that can help these folks out?
Yeah, I have direct contacts with the Department of Labor that I'd be happy to start helping them navigate that system. And I think, Mary doing outreach won't hurt anyone either.
Okay, so should I have them contact you folks there?
Yeah, please, or send us their contact information.
Okay, I'll reach out to them and tell them that you're there. Thank you.
Okay. Hopefully I'm not missing anything. I think.
All right, we'll just get a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Todd.
Okay.
Charles and Todd, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Usually people are opposed to adjourn. So thank you all. Appreciate your time today. Stay well and be safe.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank
Have a
you.
good one.
Take
Bye,
care.
everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.